Hey, if you're having issues with your instrument cluster on your 99 through probably 2004 GM trucks and SUVs, including Chevrolet Silverados, Sierras, Yukons, Tahoes, then this video may be helpful. You're watching the Car Doctor channel. Hey, welcome back to the Car Doctor channel. I'm Tim. I'm here at my repair shop, Donor Automotive in Anchorage, Alaska. And if you're new here, appreciate you stopping by. Please subscribe, and we've got some cool videos for you. This one may be helpful if you're having instrument cluster issues on your GM product. This one is a 04 Silverado, but it's going to apply to 99 through probably 04 GM trucks and SUVs. This particular cluster issue is the customer complaint of cluster non-functioning, no gauges. The only thing that's illuminating is the dash illumination for the headlights and the turn signals. The rest is just dead to the world. So I got a few diagnostic steps for you. We'll run this thing down, figure out what's going on. All right, we'll take a quick peek here, show you what's up. Key on, and all we get is the check engine light illuminated. Like I said, turn signals function, dash illumination works, changes with the rheostat, but no gauge function, no message center, no mileage displayed or anything like that. So first thing we're going to do here is hook up a scan tool. You may or may not have the ability to do that, but it's always helpful to look and see what the scan tool sees. So we'll just hook up our Solus and see what that says. Got the key on here. Let's see here, Chevrolet. I think I'll check codes. We'll go to the instrument cluster first, and instrument panel cluster, display codes. And we have no communication with the cluster, so we're not going to get any codes, not going to get any data. I'll go ahead and go to the BCM. Since it's on the network, it may have information about that, and all we have is a U1000 data link malfunction. Nothing specific to the cluster. Oops. Go back and look at history. That's all we got. So if you're in here, you may find a data fault to the IPC. That would also indicate it's not online, it's not on the network. But regardless, we know that it's not talking to the cluster, so we're going to take a deeper look. I'll stop here and say that there's also common issues with all the instrument cluster gauges on these. You'll get the fuel gauge problems, could be the stepper motor in the cluster, could be the sending unit in the tank, oil pressure, battery voltage, temperature, RPMs, all that stuff. They're all subject to issues. This is a complete failure of all gauge operation and zero communication. So a little bit different animal here. So we'll take a different diagnostic tree as a result. So now we start looking at powers and grounds, and there's a couple common things under the hood that could be a quick check that may identify the issue. There's two grounds on the back of the motor and this main battery ground that you want to look at, because that could definitely cause a lack of power to the panel and subsequent lack of communication. So first off, the battery to frame ground, the small wire that comes off the battery, actually goes underneath the front of the vehicle and attaches to the front lower left of the core support. You want to check that connection. Check your battery cables real good. There are some fuses in here for the cluster and ignition circuits that you're going to want to check. But those are easy checks without pulling the cluster. And then this main ground that comes off the firewall here attaches to the left rear of the motor. You want to take a good look at that. And then here over on the right side rear of the motor, we've got a small ground wire that comes out of the firewall and heads down to a stud on the right rear of the motor area. There may be two ground wires, and sometimes there's the wire there. Sometimes one of the wires can break off of the stud itself. So try to get that in focus. Anyway, it's kind of hard to see there, but in this case feels okay. But the only definitive way is to check the power and grounds right at the back of the connector at the panel to make sure we're getting it all the way there, because that'll alleviate issues in the harness, ignition switch, any other connectors along the way. Want to make sure we're getting power right at that connector. So we'll just pop the cluster out so we can do some checks at the back of the connector. I turn the key on, shift into low, tilt the steering wheel all the way down. Then we just pop this bezel off. That'll expose the cluster itself and the 4 bolts retaining the cluster that we just need to remove to loosen the cluster. And once we've got that loosened, make sure to turn the key off. We can pop the cluster out and just need to squeeze the retainers, disconnect the cluster. Oh, by the way, there's one thing we can do here. Go ahead and turn it back on. Grab your cluster and kind of twist it. That'll flex the circuit board. If you can flex a circuit board like this and get it to light up, whoop, there it is. There you go. See if I can get the mileage off it while I've got it working. I have no mileage display. Oh, darn. Because in order to replace the cluster, they're going to need to program the mileage. I don't see any oil change stickers or previous work orders laying around. We'll look for that and try to determine the mileage. But this is not talking to us. So I see it says fasten seatbelt very dimly. I see a mileage. So we will go ahead and check the connectors, the powers and grounds. Oh, if I can get this off there. On this connector view, and I'll show you which ones we need to check. Basically, this is B12 over here. This is the ground, I believe. Let me check my... Got a handy dandy connector view here. See if you can see this. You can screenshot it. That's the end of the connector view, and in that lower corner there. B12 is the ground, and then B11 is battery positive, and then you also want to check for battery ignition on B9 there. And also, if you want to get real tricky on the diagnosis, you can check the class 2 data with your scope and check for those data packets on the network and make sure the network signal is present on that part, which that's actually A6, A1 starting here, A12, and then B1 and B12. But your B12, always take your B12. That'll keep you sharp. It enhances your brain function. Trust me on that one. Okay? So anyway, I'll get a multimeter and we'll check those powers and grounds real quick. If we can get some light on the subject here. Just put an auto ranging digital multimeter here, and I'll ground it at B12. And then we'll go ahead and check those other circuits. Here's B11, we've got battery voltage there. And B9 ignition, we've got battery voltage there. So, looking good. You also want to pay attention to the connector itself. Those pins can loosen up in the connector. And that's a problem as well. Quick test for the connector is you can wiggle it when it's on the back of the cluster. If you just lightly wiggle the connector and you're getting intermittent function of the cluster, then of course you might want to take a closer look, see if your connector sockets have loosened up a little bit there on the pins, and you could tighten those and square that away. But in this case, it's obvious we need a cluster. So I'm going to go ahead and order one. I'm going to get the GM reman unit. So I'll have to call them with the mileage. They'll program it, and then we'll overnight it up here. I'm in Alaska, so that's the way it's got to go. I don't know if locally in the lower 48 you guys have the ability to do that, but one thing you want to do while you're here is get the number off the back, and then you'll call the dealer with that number, and they'll get you lined out. Give them your mileage, and they'll hook you up. There is going to be a core on it. There are aftermarket versions available, but you know, there's not going to be much of a price savings. So other than that, you can get a used cluster, but you're going to have to hope that it's the right one. It's going to work with your vehicle. That's like going with the GM, because I have to make sure it's done right. So that's what we'll do, and then we'll slap this in and see how it goes. Okay, we've got a new cluster. So we can put this puppy in. There's a protective covering on this. I hope so, because it's kind of blue. Remove the protective film. And we'll get this puppy slammed in there. All right. Just reconnect it. Try not to drop the screws down under the dash, so they never fall out the bottom. They get stuck somewhere below. Oh, almost dropped that one. Forgot to mention one thing you might try if all these tests have failed to produce any results. Do a hard reset, disconnect the battery, wait 30 seconds, touch the cables together, and reconnect it. Sometimes resetting the module will bring it back to life as well. A little bit tight. Well, looks like we got our mileage plugged in. We've got normal gauge operation, warning lights. Go ahead and start it. Amp gauge, oil pressure, and watch the temp. It definitely displays a low fuel level, which he had said something about the fuel gauge had gone out previously. So he may actually have an issue in the pump sending unit that's been there before the cluster actually went out. May have to dig in a little deeper there. But we've got the cluster back. I'm happy about that. All right, that about wraps this one up. Another successful repair. I really appreciate your support of my channel and watching my vids, subscribing, and all that good stuff. And I'll catch you next time. Take care.